Hi, in this unit, we're going to be talking about math and measurements. So, and this objective for this lecture is to correctly use standard measuring techniques and equipment. So, for this lecture, we are actually going to be focusing on this middle section right here, measurements in food production and cooking. So, when you are completing your guided notes for this unit, if in order to get right to this section, you can just click on this orange tab instead of having to press next through all the other slides. So click there, and we are to measurements in food production and cooking. So first of all, what is measurement? So measurements are the process of determining the quantitative size or amount of an item. So how much of something are you trying to put into a recipe? So when we are talking about quantitative, we want to think of numbers. We're not going to be thinking of words or phrases like large, small, more, less, a lot, or a little. We want to think of like 1/4 of a cup, 1/2 of a cup, 1 tablespoon, 1 teaspoon, something that's quantitative. So when we are talking about measuring, it's so important because it's crucial to the success in food production. So without being able to measure accurately, your recipe is likely to come out incorrect, or it will just be hard to replicate a recipe multiple times, and it'll be harder to convert it into larger batches, which are all very critical in food production. So it also allows for precision. When you are creating a recipe, you want to be able to replicate that product over and over again to get the same standard every single time. And the way you do that is through accurate measuring. When you measure poorly, there are a few different consequences that can come from that. So, the big one is that it's going to increase your cost for that product because of wasted materials or ingredients. Your food cost is really how you're going to keeping your food cost low, is how you're really going to keep your profit high in your food establishment, whether or not that's catering, a bakery, a coffee shop, a restaurant. Your food cost is really how you make your money. You are also going to be wasting labor is because you have to pay somebody to make the product. And if they have to do it over again because it doesn't turn out, you are then having to pay them for extra time. So you're also going to increase your risk of recipe failure. If you are not measuring accurately, you are not following the formula that the recipe was providing. And if you don't do that, then your recipe might not turn out. So it's also going to make your customers unhappy. So it's really important that we keep to a standard every time you have a product that goes out. It should be the same no matter if Susie or Bobby is completing it or making that product. It needs to be the same. So a customer can know that they can come in and get their same croissant that they love every single time, no matter what. So there are a few different units of measurement that you're going to see when you are working in the food industry. So the ones that are commonly used today are the U.S. customary ones. Those are the ones you probably have completed recipes at home. But there's also the metric system. So the metric system is also known as the International System of Units because pretty much the whole rest of the world uses the metric system except for us. So the US customary system is how we are going to be measuring things in my intro and advanced culinary classes. So it is the most commonly used system of measurement in the United States, but the metric system is sometimes used because of like international recipes. So I've worked for a Canadian company before, and all of the recipes that we used were in the metric system. But for the most part, you're going to see US customary recipes. It is defined and governed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So the modern metric system is the official system of measurement in almost every other country in the entire world except for the US. It is defined and governed by the International Bureau of Weights and Measurement, which is located in France. So when using the metric system, you're going to see these other types of units. So you'll see milli, centi, deci, and kilo. So milli is 1,000 times smaller, centi is 100 times smaller, a deci is 10 times smaller, and a kilo is 1,000 times larger. So like a millimeter, a milliliter, a centiliter, those kind of things is what you're going to see. So other types of measurements that you're going to see in food production can include distance, weight, volume, and temperature. So when we're talking about length, it's usually we are talking about inch, foot, and yard in the US. So we in the metric system, it is commonly measured in meters. So for length, you will see, for example, it'll say like cut your zucchini into 1/2 inch rounds. So here are the differences between US customary and the metric system. This is the conversion. So if you were to convert 1 inch into a centimeter, it would be 2.5 centimeters. When we're talking about weight in the US customary, you are going to see ounces and pounds. And in the metric system, you're going to see grams. So here are some weight conversions between the US customary in ounces to pounds to grams. So when we are talking about measuring accurately, measuring by weight is going to be by far the most accurate than measuring by volume. And the reason for that being is that the like if you're measuring flour, a cup of flour, the way it condenses and their air pockets, it is less accurate as to the weight is going to be the same every single time. All right, next we have volume. So in the US customary and in the recipes you'll see in our class, you'll see different units like teaspoon, tablespoon, cups, fluid ounces, and quarts. And in the metric system, they use the unit liter. Here are the dry volume conversions, and here's your liquid volume conversion. The great thing about this in the modern day is that we all have phones or some sort of technology that if you are completing recipe and you're still not completely sure about conversions, you can always use your phone. But after you use a certain amount of conversions over and over again, you kind of start to remember them. All right, next is temperature. So in recipes that you're going to see in our class, you'll see Fahrenheit. But if we were going to be doing Celsius, or if we are going to be doing the metric system, you would see Celsius. And then here is the temperature conversion between Fahrenheit and Celsius. Okay, let's talk about how we're going to measure. So different measuring equipment to use for measuring distance are going to be things like tape measures, rulers, and marked cutting boards. So when we are first learning about knife skills in this class, we will be using a cutting board that is marked like a grid. And so you are able to get one giant ruler. And so you can mark your cuts and you can make sure you are completely accurate. Because when we learn about different knife cuts, we're going to learn that each one has a different types of dimensions that they need to have in order to make it like a large dice or a small dice. So we're going to be using inches when we're talking about distance. And so you guys, this looks like a ruler. We have 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, 3/8, and a half. And I'll just go the same for the other hashes. So when so here are a couple little tips for using a marked cutting board. Include placing cutting board on a clean level surface to avoid food from moving while cutting. You want to make sure to pay attention to the placement on the board and to ensure each cut is the intended size. And you want to make sure to clean the cutting board after every single use, just to make sure that the food doesn't build up in the grooves. You'll see ours is plastic, and so it's not wood like this because the wood, it's easier to get those kind of grooves in there. Whereas plastic, by the time it gets those grooves, we replace them. Okay, so measuring weight in food production, we're going to have all sorts of different ways to do that. There's a digital hanging scale. We will not be using that. That's mostly used in like animal production for like cattle and things like that. Electronic table scale. So again, that's for more larger products. and for larger scaled items, a dial spring scale. So that's one right here. We will be using that in class, as well as a digital scale. So when we're reading a dial scale, it's going to be kind of like a ruler. So we have, this is between the longer and thicker marks are going to represent the larger amount, and then in between is going to um, represent 1 unit. And it's all going to look different. Sometimes it'll just be 1 pound or 1 unit in between. Sometimes it'll be 10, like this one. Okay, so when we are weighting and we're scaling things by weight, you want to make sure that you are zeroing out the scale every time and that it's just the food product that is being weighed and nothing else. When you use a container, you can zero out or tear your scale to make sure that that container is not being weighed in there. You also want to make sure you calibrate your scale fairly often. In our class, whenever we use the digital scale, just because so many different people are using it, we calibrate it at the beginning every single time we use it. So when we're talking about measuring volume, we're going to be using things like measuring spoons, dry measuring cups, and liquid measuring cups. This is going to be your first lab in class, as you're going to be practicing measuring with all of these different tools. So we're also going to learn how to read a measuring cup. So um, the number of marks between the labeled marks imply what each mark represents. So this one, we're going to be looking at fluid ounces, but you guys have probably used it when you're talking about cups, like a quarter of a cup, an eighth of a cup, that kind of thing. So when we are using measuring cups, you want to make sure you are placing the cup on a flat, even surface. Do not hold the cup up in the air to take the measurement. You want to make sure if you're using measuring spoons to hold it steady when you're measuring. You want to pour ingredients into these items slowly. You want to level off the top, and you want to view the measurement line of wet ingredients at eye level. And again, we'll practice all of this in our first lab. When you're talking about measuring tools for temperature, there's all sorts of different cool gadgets you can get to measure the temperature. So we have glass thermometers that are used for candy making because they get at a very high temperature, or we have like a candy thermometer is what it's called. You have dial thermometers that this is mostly used inside of like refrigerator items or freezers. You have your digital thermometers right here, and then you have your infrared thermometers. So the infrared thermometers are not meant to take internal temperatures, it's just surface level. So we use these for like when we're tempering chocolate and that kind of thing. We use digital thermometers when we are measuring meat and other items just to make sure that it's outside of the danger zone. So we're going to go all over, like we're going to learn in person how to read a glass thermometer, so I'm not going to go over this. And that's it.